Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the IESF World Esports Championship qualifiers. We're going into the Americas region. We've seen Asia and Oceania. We have seen Europe as well. Some really exciting games. 12 games each in all of these qualifications. Different formats, different amount of teams, different circles, different endings. And obviously, I get to do this. Unfortunately, not alone. It is Kobo back with me analyzing analyzing some stuff. I almost misworded that here. But yeah, Kobo, how are you doing?
Oh, really, really good, Felix. Happy to be here. A little bit sunburned, as you can see, but we are ready to kick off the games tonight. Tonight from Europe, this evening, if you're in the Americas region yourself. And I can't wait. We're sending another 2 teams in the next 2 days. So can't wait to catch us up to see where the games are going like and to see who's actually going to Riyadh towards the later months of this year.
We had amazing teams in the Euro qualifier that we've just seen last week. Now, we were talking about amazing teams, but just to give you guys a perspective of how experienced some of these players are, we've had literally world champions playing, right? Literal world champions playing just last week. And this time around, it's not going to be too different. Yes, we have some less experienced teams as well, but especially coming out of the Brazil region, we'll get to all these teams in a minute, especially coming out of the Brazil region, we have incredibly experienced and also successful teams coming into this tournament.
Yeah, we have some big high-profile names as you are looking at the daily schedule that will kick us off for today and tomorrow. Same schedule, both days, different days, same times. SANHOK, Erangel, and then closing out with 2 Miramars. So we're starting off on the craziest map, and then we come back to the old faithfuls. And yeah, this is, once again, all of these qualifiers have one thing in common. It's the more established names, it's the bigger names we're looking towards, versus teams that might not have the same experience, especially on an international level, but that have proven themselves nationally and are here to prove that they can make it to the World Esports Championship. Yeah,
this is what it's going to be about during today and obviously during tomorrow as well. As we get to see these 12 games. So today is going to be 6 matches. You've just seen the format, and obviously tomorrow is going to be the same kind of format and same maps as well. Point structure, I mean, we all know it by now. In case you don't, this is how it goes. You get a certain amount of placement points that you have on screen right now. First one obviously takes away 10, the second one still gets 6, and the third one 5, and so on and so forth. And you obviously get 1 elimination point per kill that you get in these rounds. Pretty standard. We haven't seen it change since, I want to say, almost 2 years now. I think the PMGC 2022 has been the date where that has been changed. But ever since then, it's been this consistent point structure. And obviously, in these IESF World Esports Championship qualifiers, it shouldn't be any different. And it isn't, fortunately, enough.
Yeah. It's the same thing we know, and this time the one thing that's really interesting is that we have 9 to 11 to get no placement points, right? We are playing with 11 teams here. That's going to change the lobby quite a bit. Well, we'll talk about that later. For now, we should have a look at the different rosters playing tonight and have a bit of a talk of who's going in. Chile, one of the teams we're looking at with, I'd say, a reasonable amount of experience. Some of these players have played at the top level for sure. And then, interestingly enough, we have Milovan here, who's just recently left Influence Rage, and that's the team we're looking at when we're looking at Brazil. So maybe a bit of healthy rivalry there between Chile and Brazil.
Yeah, and he especially will meet some of his teammates actually in the Brazil roster. But yeah, very experienced roster. I want to highlight Potro as well. Obviously, it's just played in the PMSL Americas Spring, literally just some week ago, so I'm going to say 1.5 months ago, maybe at most. I think it was the middle or end of June. And so, yeah, really experienced roster as well. So we head on over to Guatemala. We know these guys because they have qualified the last time around. Mr. Teru, definitely a well-known figure in the Guatemalan scene, especially when it comes to PUBG Mobile Esports. He's been the owner and founder of Mayan Esports, for example. Joining the forces will be Alex, Minog, and Jyrok. Definitely a team that has to be watched. As we said, they were able to qualify last time around. This time around, though, as we said, some really, really experienced rosters coming into this, and only the top 2 will advance, so it's definitely going to be a big task ahead of them.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these teams are looking for an absolute Herculean task to make it past some of the top profile guys. Argentina coming in with Hate, Rema, Octi, and Mystic. We've seen some of these guys before. But we will have to wait and see how they perform here. And it's not going to be enough to be decent. It's not going to be enough To hold yourself, you need to get top 2 here, right? So that's always hard, and no matter what lobby you're playing in, top 2 is always tricky. You gotta be clearly better than the rest, and we'll have to wait and see what the guys from the very south of South America can do.
You've lived in Argentina, actually, haven't you?
Yes.
So
sí,
it's
claro.
gonna be... You know the language, you know the words. I've seen you talk to the Argentinian roster as well, I believe, last time at the IESF World Esports Championship. It's been an amazing region, it's been an amazing country, and it continues to make some big strides on the international PUBG Mobile esports scene. This time around, there's also one team participating, one country, and that is Uruguay. I don't think they've qualified yet to the IESF World Esports Championship. I don't think Uruguay has been able to do so, but either way, definitely some rather experienced players in there as well. I want to highlight Juaco. He's played in the PMSL as well. Not quite the finish that we had from Potro, for example, who's taken 7th place with this team, Team Keizo. But he's definitely an experienced player as well. Was playing for Entity Net for still believe he is, once again, in the American region. And together with Cardi and Lion Kid and CC, a team that we will have to watch as well. Definitely a contender for the top 2.
Yeah, you had a little touch on who qualified last year and who qualified to pass World Esports Championships. Last year it was Colombia, Argentina, and Chile, and I think that is some of the teams we are looking to again. And then maybe one more in the mix, but we'll come to that in a second. Panama, definitely a bit of an underdog here, but so are many of the rosters coming on in, and we've seen some of them pop off in past qualifiers. But it's been a topic, I feel like, in most of the regions where even if an underdog pops off on the first day, the favorites do kind of tend to come back once there's more games in the mix. So it's going to be a tricky prospect to get yourself into a top 2 here. Similar things for Suriname. Mello, we've seen him around as well. And we'll see what they can do. Pindaboy, Pills, Chenil. They're going to try their very best, but they have to really just produce a big upset here if they're going to want to end up in the top 2.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an upset if that is to come true. Panama and Suriname, two of the lesser experienced teams in this lobby. Unfortunately, not really any big international attendance in terms of the big international PUBG Mobile esports tournaments this year, but who knows, maybe that's about to change. Suriname is a country that I'm very happy to see. Definitely a developing country in terms of esports as well. More and more players now participating in PUBG Mobile esports tournament, and good on them for bringing a team in here like that, the Suriname Esports Federation, making that happen. So good on them. Very nice to see them play here. As we head on over to the next team, it is Colombia, and you were talking about qualification. I think that was one of the teams that you've just talked about as well, qualifying for the last Esports World Championship. And I want to say not a team to be underestimated either, but not quite on the level that we've talked about in terms of Brazil and Chile.
No, probably not, but still a team that you would definitely put in the ranks of favorites amongst this lobby, and definitely a team that has the expectation to qualify here, or at least has that expectation towards themselves. We've seen Legal, Achilles, we've seen those guys at an international LAN already, so they know what it takes, and they will do their very best to get there. Dominican Republic, they have, as you can always tell by the clan tags, right? You can always tell these guys are on teams, these guys are on squads. Some of them are together on the same squads. Melito and Legend, that is, playing for the Panthers. And again, I think we'll have to wait and see what they can actually bring to the table, because this is one of the teams that's a mix. This is not a full lineup. This is not a team that's used to playing together, and that can sometimes be a bit of a breath of fresh air, but sometimes it can hold them back a little bit when it just comes to those crunch moments. It's nice to have things to fall back on. It's nice to have habits to go back into, and here's a team that you love to talk about and that we'll watch a lot today that has exactly that. They have the structure, they have the experience together, and they are coming in as the absolute favorite into this lobby.
Yeah, so I was talking about Milovan. He obviously left at the end of July after that PMSL season, but the rest of them are still playing for Influence Rage as far as I'm concerned, and that is the complete roster coming in for Influence Rage. So you were talking about teams obviously coming in here as a mix, countries coming in as a mix. This time, it's very different. Brazil, these guys have been playing together for forever. I've talked about Influence Rage, is who they're representing, at least non-country wise, in terms of organizations. And yeah, these guys are massive fraggers. I don't think I need to introduce them to any of you. Federal Law, Little Boy Diego, and even if any of these guys isn't able to play, they can pick up Lawrence into the mix, and I think he'll be able to perform just fine as well. As we head on over to one of the bigger regions as well in PUBG Mobile esports scene. I've talked about the America region, the America PMSL. These guys unfortunately have not participated as far as I'm concerned, but pretty strong team as well. Making it through the United States qualifier is Mushtaba, Chills, Pika, and obviously Bad Boy as the last player in the mix. Strong team, also not to be underestimated, I think.
We'll have to wait and see what they put on the table here. Like we said, right, it's extremely hard to judge the teams, and I think even for the teams, it's extremely hard to judge each other, as so many mixes and so many teams just coming together for this tournament. We have Ecuador coming in with Bree, Dallas, Tilin, and Sildagas. And again, another roster where we've seen them, I think we've seen some of them perform, but realistically, we have no idea how this team is going to do, how well they're going to gel together, how the chemistry is going to go, how the confidence is going to go. And a very tricky one for all of these teams to judge, even not only the other rosters, but how is a lobby going to play with this amount of teams in it, right? And how is a lobby going to play where probably a lot of the teams are looking at some of the other teams as big favorites, and they're hoping to get the upset themselves. So tons of interesting dynamics that we have here tonight, and that will carry on over into tomorrow, where we play the other 6 games at this stage.
Yeah, look, Kovo, I think we've touched on this for plenty of times throughout the recent qualifier broadcast, but I love an underdog story. I'm the first one to say it. I love an underdog story, even if that means some of these absolute favorites and big names maybe potentially not making it to Riyadh in the later stages of this year. But then again, I think what also has come true time and time again, unfortunately, to some degree, it's just the favorites running away with it. And we've seen it in Asia and Oceania now. All the top favorites kind of separating themselves from the rest of the leaderboard. We've seen it in Europe now as well, the incredibly experienced teams as well. And we didn't only have 4 or 5 of them. We had 6, 7, 8, 9 teams that had experience at the very top level, and ultimately still had 4 or 5 favorites still separating themselves from the rest of the group. And so if we get on over to predictions, I want to get your opinion on this. I think, yes, we have plenty of teams that have players in there. For example, I don't think we've touched on this. Inactive now, coming in from the Dominican Republic. He's literally just played in the PMSL as well. Titan Gaming, that also had a roster in the EU region for some time. But the NA region roster is just as strong, almost. And they're a pretty good showing as well. But he's in that, mixed with players that don't necessarily have the same amount of experience. And I think that's going to make a difference as opposed to some of these favorites that are also, on top of them being favorites in their individual right, coming in with a full format. And we got to talk about Brazil as we head on over to predictions. It's just 2 spots, Kovo, and I want to get down to it before we get into this first game. The 2 teams that you see fighting up front, who are they? Straight up.
I think for me, it's 3 teams that are fighting for these 2 spots just on paper. I think it might easily be different in practice, but I'm looking at Brazil, I'm looking at Chile, I'm looking at Colombia. And those are the rosters that I think have the most experience. Like you said, they have the most potential, but you never know what's going to happen in practice, and I hope we see a bit of an upset, especially on day 1. You know, we're playing 12 games. There's a lot of chances for a better team to separate themselves from the pack, but there's also a good chance for a team to just run away with it today and then have a really good position coming into tomorrow. If we had 3 or 4 slots, I'd be way more open to say anyone can make it. With a top 2 only, I think it's going to be really tricky. And we've seen this in other tournaments. We've seen this in smaller tournaments or in regional tournaments. One player with a massive amount of experience can very often not carry the team all the way. But we've watched the EMEA qualifier, the Europe qualifier recently, and I feel like Bulgaria, Icy literally did just that. And you see it very, very seldomly. You don't see it often at all, that a single player is able to have this kind of impact. But he did it, and he did it in a top 5. Doing it to a top 2 when you have big hitters like Brazil in the lobby, I'm not sure if it's going to be possible, but I would love to see it. I would absolutely love to see somebody pop off that we don't have on our cards at all.
Yeah, I mean, I can only agree. I said it before, I'm the first one to hope for an underdog story. In this one, yes, there's a few underdogs, as I've said, mixed teams coming in that maybe have 1 or 2 players that, as you said as well, to kind of bring that comparison to the EMEA region, that maybe potentially can make something happen. But then again, it was icy in the EMEA region, and I think Icy has been known internationally as one of the most strongest, maybe even the strongest fragger to some degree. At some point, I feel like he was the strongest fragger in the EMEA region. So, I mean, he played for Nico Galaxy in that all-star roster at some point. And that goes to show you, I mean, if they can literally pick the strongest players from all the Russian, I mean, he played with Coops, for example, who's the strongest fragger at some point in the region. So, just to give you guys perspective of how strong IC really is.
Yeah.
But in this one, yes, we have some players competing obviously in PMSL and all that stuff, but nothing to the level of Icy, and that in my opinion makes it a little bit less likely that we're going to see that kind of a performance, especially as Brazil, in my opinion, is going to run away with this one. Just too strong. That lineup itself just too damn strong, and Chile as well. So many experienced players. Yes, it's a mix, but every single one of these guys has played at the top level at some point. I mean, even Miller, when I talked about this, he just left the Brazilian roster. That's going to give him a very interesting advantage as well, knowing how these guys are going to play. Just 2 months ago, he was in the midst of that team. He knows how they approach early games. He knows also maybe potentially how they approach this type of qualifier, because we haven't talked about this yet. 11 teams, Kobo. That's going to change things.
Yeah, that's going to change things, and top 2 is going to change things. This is not we can get top 8 and go into finals, or we can get a top 6 and go into finals, as you might have in some of the more regular tournaments. This is a top 2. This is a go big or go home. I've talked about this plenty recently, where it's like you have some lobbies sometimes where you maybe have 24 teams, 16 of them go to the finals. You only have to beat 8 teams in a 24-team lobby. That's not that hard. Now you have to beat 9 teams in an 11-team lobby. That's extremely hard. You have to be way better than the rest of the lobby. And like we said, a lot of people are going to fall short here. Even if I'm putting up 3 favorites on the board, one of them is 100% going to fall short, right? So it's going to be super interesting to see how that plays out. There's one more thing that I kind of want to throw in the mix as we're hyping up Brazil. Being such a clear favorite isn't always a really good thing, right? That can be a bit of a thing to trip over, and maybe the mentality isn't quite there. They're just, okay, we're qualifying anyways. I wouldn't be super surprised to not see them at the top today, maybe as a second, maybe as a third, but usually when it gets more serious tomorrow, when everybody has their last few chances, then we usually see the favorites come back a little bit, because they do perform under pressure a little bit better, and they are ready to shine when it matters. So if we don't see Brazil in the top 2 today, I wouldn't be crazy surprised. If we don't see them in the top 2 tomorrow, I will be.
Ladies and gentlemen, whether or not we will see them in the top 2, and I can only agree with this, by the way. That's what we're going to figure out after a very short break, and we'll be right back for game number 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back of this very short break. We will be heading into match 1 very, very shortly. Final predictions, Kobo. I know you said 3 teams. You didn't give me a definite answer on these 2 teams that I think, or you think, will qualify towards the IESF World Esports Championship. So before the first game, give me 2 names.
I would love to say Argentina right now. Okay, I'm extremely biased in this one, but I think my rational brain has to go with Brazil and Chile here. But I think it's pretty close for second. I think just on paper, Brazil is running away with it. We have no idea if that's going to actually materialize, but second place is going to be super contested, and maybe that's a story we see tomorrow. Maybe we see a lot of teams going into the fight for the first few placements. Maybe we see a battle for second, who knows? But my prediction, Brazil and Chile, I don't know if you would agree.
I most definitely will. Unfortunately, I don't think this region is as close as what we've seen coming out of the Asia and Oceania region, also the EMEA region. I think in this one, we just have 2 strings that just, if you look at the rosters themselves, they just pop out too heavily in order to not be picked as the clear favorites here. And then again, you said you said it yourself, it's not always an advantage going into it the way these 2 teams are going into it, especially since we only have 12 games and 11 teams. That's going to change your kind of style of play either way, because playing in a 20 or 11 team lobby, no matter how you put it, it's still going to require a very different game strategically than what you might see in a normal 16-team lobby environment. And in this one, I might even argue this is to some degree a advantage to some of these frag-heavier teams, quite in contrast to what we've seen in the Europe qualifier with these 20 teams, because 11 teams means more potential for isolated fights. Yeah, and that, in theory, should favor some of these teams that might be stronger in fighting. And that is also the reason why I have to pick Brazil and maybe to some degree the Dominican Republic as well as the teams coming out up front. But we've been I kind of want to say duped before, because some teams that might look strong on paper just haven't performed in the qualifier. We were talking about Moldova, we were talking about to some degree Germany as well, or we're at it in the EMEA region, just not pulling on through. So at this point, it's able to happen to anyone.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you make up a good point there. I think an 11-team lobby is different, but it's different in a very different way than the 20-team lobby or 21-team lobby we recently watched, right? And I think in a way this might be easier to maneuver, because in a 21-team lobby, try to jump into a 21-team SANHOK and try to understand where to rotate and what should be free and what could be free in front of you. It's basically impossible. And then you say, well, we don't know where anybody is. We're going to try to go for fights, but there's 5 teams in your area looking to third party you. This is going to be very different here. And today is going to be way more about picking the right fight and executing it well, but you don't have to be as hasty. You don't have to be as crazy about it. We're not going to get punished as quickly and as hard. But you got to be greedy. You got to be greedy in an 11-team lobby. You got to take a lot of space, and you got to try and defend a lot of space. The first match is on the way, though, Felix. We have a plane going past SANHOK. We have players jumping out of the air. We'll see if there's a hot drop soon, but the action has kicked off.
It has kicked off indeed. It's a fairly fair plane path. If there ever are any unfair plane paths in SANHOK, once again, this definitely isn't it. Then again, as we've said, it is SANHOK, it is 11 teams. You should be able to find a spot anywhere you want. We've talked about this as well in one of the groups in the Asia and Oceania qualifier, that if you have 11 teams, SANHOK kind of becomes way more competitive than what it usually is, right? With more space all around the edges, with SANHOK just being kind of predetermined to kind of be played on foot, usually due to the amount of teams. That kind of becomes obsolete to some degree, right? And these teams will be able to play around with all the potential playing advantages you normally have on some of these big maps as well, like car rotations. And we've seen some experienced teams dominate in the Asia region, especially because of their car rotations. So I don't want to see this being adapted here as well. And it's going to be interesting to see who's going to do it as the first team. Obviously, the big favorites in the center of the map, they will be finding themselves in boot camp, and they will do so uncontested.
Uncontested in boot camp, but a slight contest towards that San Miguel area, towards the southwest. We had Guatemala and the Dominican Republic, if I've seen that correctly, facing off in a bit of a hot drop. As it's a very split one. It's a very split one. If you've seen where some of the Dominican Republic players are, they are very spread across this SANHOK map, very spread across this southern side, and that's a big disadvantage when you have players landing so close. Emperador, he's got to be extremely careful because Guatemala has a pretty solid idea of where he is, and if they've seen the parachutes, he will also have a pretty good idea that there's not a lot of players here. It should be a solo. He's got one teammate close by, but that's all she wrote for Emperor. So he's got to be careful. They don't want to give him isolated 1v1s, but they are going to run him down. And as I say that, they did give him a 1v1, and he's won that one cleanly. Level 3 helmet as well, Felix.
Yes, Emperador, he's got quite the good opportunity now in terms of potentially making some more moves as a solo, but this is already disastrous for them. No matter how this goes, Guatemala loses a player and a 4v1. That is not supposed to happen. This should have been a good start for Guatemala. It still is to some degree, but we got to retract some of it. Losing a player like that is not how you want to start this first game, especially not if it's a best of 12. You want to have all matches available to be played as 4. Yeah. And even though, once again, this player has now been flushed out, you will do so at a very high cost. This isn't beneficial to anyone at this point. Definitely not the Dominican Republic either. They'll be in the same boat, one frag. But one player down is going to reduce their chances of having the maximum amount of points in all these 12 games played.
It's something that you can't stress enough, and I feel like you have to talk about this a little bit because it's easy to say, well, they've just lost a fourth of their team. But just think about how much work a single player does in a whole game, how much information a player gathers, how much pressure a player can put on other teams, how much utility a player can cover, how many damage utils, how much damage he can do himself. There is so much a player does in the span of these 15, 20 minutes that conclude with a really important fight for maybe even the win. Losing a player so early is a crazy amount of value lost in a team. And yes, you're still keeping 3 out of 4 up, but that player just really compounds throughout the time of the game. And losing a player so early is a big, big problem. And if you continue to do so, if that becomes a thing that happens to you a lot, you're really just going to find yourself towards the bottom of the scoreboard, because there is no way you perform in a PUBG lobby when you're consistently a member down.
Couldn't agree more. It's going to be tough to perform like that, as you said. And it's also kind of tough to look back at these games then and kind of find something that you could have potentially done better. I think from that point onwards, with the fact that you're only 3 players, it's very hard to analyze your games and be talking about afterwards. Hey, what could we have done better in terms of rotations and options? Because your options, essentially are limited from that point onwards, and they're incredibly limited, actually. You're never able to potentially take a fight that, is an isolated fight of that, because even if it's a 3-on-3, you'll be way more prone to third-party fights and just generally, playmaking ability in terms of angles that you can cover towards the opposing team. That's all of that is going to be limited. So goes to show you how important it is that you need to play as a full 4-man. And I mean, you're kind of practicing as a full 4-man as well.
Yeah,
I've never seen a team practice as a 3-man. That's just never what happens, because if you have lost a play already, that's your first mistake.
Yeah.
Right. So from that point onwards, it kind of becomes irrelevant to some degree on how you practice early game as a 3-man. But either way, not the only team that has lost a player. It is indeed the United States, losing 2 players in the early game as well. There must be against Chile.
Yeah, it was.
Now position themselves towards the southern side as well. A pretty big split. Same goes for Panama. They are securing that entire south side hill. A lot of area being covered, but pretty good position in terms of gathering information.
Really big discrepancy in playstyles here. Brazil, hiding out in a compound, just playing it safe, playing behind corners, scouting out every now and then, but you saw Info, or Flaw here, basically just sitting behind a corner, just using the camera to look outside, and then other teams spreading themselves wide and thin on a hillside, trying to get all the information possible. So different approaches for multiple teams here, and the USA really getting the short end of the stick there. Chile taking a quick 2 with, I think it was Panama, further on the hillside, looking to third party, but realizing this is not a fight. This is just 2 players dying very quickly. No chance for us to engage. As a little bit further on south, Rima is trying to get some information for his squad as he's prowling on out. Very, very chill time, those 2 here. Jerry and Rima, they're hanging out, they're getting some information, and they're having a very quiet phase 1, Felix.
Really quiet phase 1. And you can kind of see in terms of strategy what we've been talking about, right? So much space for all of these teams. That's very unusual for SANHOK. Would see way more clashes on rotation on all the edges and way more vehicles being used as well. And that makes it more competitive. This map has always been the one that was hated the most by all the players. And just based off of the fact that sometimes you just have no control over how well you position yourself inside a circle. There's always going to be this massive advantage for teams in the center of it, because it's just so tough to breach you. If you do have a good spot inside the circle, it's so tough to make a move on you without being third-partied, or even getting there, because there's no rotation pass, right? If you can't use vehicles, how do you even get to centralized positions? You'll have to fight your way through 3 or 4 teams, and due to the fact that the sightlines are so close in distance, so short in distance, there's no way to get rotations with vehicles in there either. So essentially it means that you're going to be at a heavy advantage if you do have a centralized circle on top of you. And that also focuses teams that are looting centralized positions in the first place. But this time around, 11 teams, I said it, makes things way more fair. And for all these teams, there is going to be enough rotation pathings available to get yourself in. And I think this
Yeah.
right here is a perfect example of this, rotating around Sheila at the top of the hill.
Yeah, and it opens up more opportunities for sure. It makes up for more different plays. Now, Dominican Republic, they try to be a little bit cheeky. They were hiding in that compound. They were proning behind doors, and they almost catch out a player on rotation, but they end up getting away. And they end up getting away because, like you said, there's a little bit more space on the map. There's a little bit less chance to trip on a snake. I'm saying that. Do you say? They've got a player here, and he's about to get walked up on. He must know that a lot of them are gone as well. I don't know if he wants to pull the trigger here. That's some crazy trigger discipline. Has a few of the members leaving in cars, but he wants to play his life over playing the single kill. Maybe they want 2 entries here. Maybe they want a bigger opening. Because maybe if his teammate gets the first knock, then maybe Muitawa can do a lot more from an unknown position here.
United States in a troublesome position there. They're not so sure if they want to engage this, as you've said. I think they're kind of waiting on this first pick from Mujtaba, which is a smart decision. It's already they have absolutely no idea. This might be a perfect trap coming out from the United States. They just have to be careful of getting spotted. And maybe Piddles has now got an idea, but apparently he doesn't. He stands back up. I was worried there for a second for the United States that he's been spotted, but they have no idea. He's in a perfect rich line to potentially grab 1, maybe 2 frags. And if they activate together at the same time, this might be an unthinkable trap for Suriname. And look, I can't even blame them at this point. This is horrible. You would never expect someone to be that close around you.
I mean, look at Piddles as well. He's looking around. He's trying to use his camera. He's trying to be careful. They have no idea of what's actually going on. And right now, at this point, there's a good chance that the USA actually come out on top of this scuffle. When it happens, Blue Zone's now coming in, so they will have to move, and they might run into the open arms of these snakes. Guatemala on the other side find a quick knock towards Argentina on the hill. But this should be a fairly doable res, especially with the smoke coming out. A few more shots over the hill as we are heading into phase 2 in just another few seconds here. Res comes through. Full reset coming out. And there's the snakes stepping up. It's a first knock, but he doesn't get the second. Pinda Boy is still up and running. Do they know about the second snake, though? I don't think they do. And that's exactly what they were doing, Felix. That's exactly the setup they tried to pull off. And it works perfectly.
What a play coming out from the United States. That trap has sprung to absolute perfection. They waited for the first place to rotate off, and then they activated. And how they did it, once again, perfectly played. The timing was on point. And Mujtaba and obviously Kid. I guess that might be Pika. No, Pika's in there as well. Who is him? It must be Bad Boy, right? I think it's Bad Boy in his lineup, even though his name doesn't suggest that. Making that one timing-wise an absolute perfect play. They will salvage as much as they can, I feel like, already with this one. Because losing 2 players in the early game with SANHOK normally means you'll literally just be gatekept wherever you go. Having third-party potential as a 2-man, yes, it might be harder than other maps, but especially with 11 teams only, that kind of negates it again. So good stuff coming out for the United States. We have the next fight coming in. Mystic not only takes 1, takes down 2 players, and it's Argentina, your personal favorite, with the big buyers, is making more moves against Chile as the DBS in hand isn't enough. S12k in hand is not going to be enough either, as the trade will come through, but it is going to be another flash coming in from obviously the representatives of Brazil. I'm not sure who it was right there, but they have secured it, and that means Mystic now has to wait to potentially pick up another player, as there's only 1 more available.
He wants to get that res. Now the nades are already coming in. He knows there's players on his doorstep, right? He has a pretty good idea that somebody around here wants this. Brazil, they were looking to third-party this. Now they realize, okay, we don't have a ton of information on this compound. We don't exactly know where they're playing. We know they could be 2 alive, and they're going to play it safe, especially because the zone shift has just come in. They have no risk that they need to take here, Brazil. Orange team in the middle, if you haven't figured it out yet, is between Ruins and Painan. They're possibly the best spot in the circle. They're not going to run out for a kill or 2. So they are playing this safe here. They're playing this chill, and they're hoping to dominate the late game so they don't have to get all the kills now. Just very different approach to a lot of these teams on the edges who might have lost a player or two already, who really just want to salvage, like you said, right? Salvage every single kill point they get, backstab a team, maybe even get themselves into placements just by killing a team. Meanwhile, some of the favorites sitting pretty in the middle.
Good stuff as the next circle is about to come in. As we also might have another fight on the edge, potentially. Uruguay is looking towards Colombia. They're opening up the angles. Excuse me, that is Ecuador, obviously. And the first knock must have happened already, as Darian is on the race against Daggers. A couple of pop shots being put out, making sure that the rest of the players from Uruguay in the distance know that he's not only been revived, but he's ready to pop some shots as well. Now the rotate comes on through, and it shouldn't really matter too much. They're falling back for the time being. They've secured that northwestern side of things. So the rotation path straight into the next phase is relatively easily done. They don't need to engage this, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah, nice little bit of presence showing there, right? Like you said, he's not just showing his presence, he's showing them, okay, the res has come through. And that's a big piece of information. Makes sure they don't even come over that ridgeline and leaves both of these teams a little bit more time to pursue the rest of their game. Guatemala coming in from the blue zone. They have an Argentinian duo right in front of them that they have to be very careful about. But I think they should be able to sweep around it. No, instantly caught. As I said, that caster curse in full effect. Fishy pan out of it. And it was looking like they knew. It was looking like they had an idea because of all the smokes coming out. But they were still caught off guard by the angles that the Argentinian players were holding. So tough times now for Guatemala. Down to a 2 versus 2 essentially on that western side.
More frags coming in the next phase, that's for sure. But up until now, it's been relatively passive, as we've expected from the first phases on SANHOK. Guatemala making their way in. We've seen these guys get into skirmishes towards the south and eastern side as well. This round they made their way towards the western side. As I say that, it is going to be another frag being taken away from them. Argentina, similar colors but different country. Mystic finds Tony as he tried to rotate on in. Just leaves one player for Guatemala left standing. He is inside the phase 1 though. We are approaching placement points. And with them already having one kill point being secured, at least it's not a 0-point round. It has been a tough, difficult rotation, so that is quite important for this very first round of the day.
Meanwhile, we see a bit of a slaughter going on in the kill feed. That is Colombia in the Painan area, picking up a nice crash towards them. They're able to clean up, but nicely played by those Argentinian players there, biding their time, taking it slow, just holding down cross angles. Look at that nade. What is that? 1 HP on inactive. We've talked about them a little bit in the pre-show. We said this was a name to be looking out for, but David just left to his own devices and barely any HP to work with. Another nade following up, not bouncing just as well. But the Blues on their back. They don't have a whole lot of time here. And they have to get this res fast, because we can see. They don't know it yet, but there's so many teams around that are looking to close out this edge, right? Argentina's been starting to look over. We've also seen Hisoka make his way out of Painan to try and look over this hillside, see what he can grab. And then obviously, Melo from Suriname is still on top. DBS as well if they get close to his shack. Not an easy spot to be in here.
We'll have Suriname right in front of them. Might be a good pick to just clean him out, but I'm not sure if they know about him. More shots from the distance, and maybe Melo has got an opportunity now to do something huge. He takes down inactive. I've talked about this, one of the stronger fraggers in this lobby as well, and he peeks around. Melo, what a performance. Unfortunately, the nade hits just perfect, and Puppy Zhao will trade things out. There was nothing to dodge there. He even tried to make it outside of the shack, but the nade, my goodness, right on the doorstep. Would have taken him down inside and outside. What a nade coming out from Puppy Zhao to at least salvage one more point, and a second point as well, to the fact that they obviously survived up until the placement points. Good stuff, as the first 5 teams have now been already eliminated. Phase 5 is approaching, and the favorites are all left standing.
Brazil up with 4, Colombia up with 4, and then obviously Argentina, 7 elims, 6 of that on one player. They've been salvaging the heck out of this game. They've really been doing an amazing job at not only staying in this, but continuing to crack points on the board. Now, though, there's a big crash coming out, and there's a lot of util coming their way already. They might just all blow to pieces here on the entry, not even getting on inside. Daggers finds one, knocked and flushed instantly. Looking for a second as well. And they're looking to close that door before it even opens. Really nice util onto the cards, onto the players outside. Makes this one so manageable for Ecuador.
Definitely. That compound is to some degree really tough to hold, but if you have support from the distance, and you can see Brazil is chiming in against Uruguay, then it's definitely possible. So about that third-party potential. There's Navy, still looking around. She's got players on that eastern hillside too, and Ecuador continues to defend this. Colombia, though, on the other side of the map, finds a frag on their own as well. They will secure the first kill point as well.
Not the best frag to be coming out. Uruguay struggling a little bit with the util here, but maybe just one opening is all that they need. That's a pretty solid molly. That's a good nade to follow up, and that's a player down in the building. Just Adis left on the close range. Darian from the far, but now the support's there. They realize it's needed, and they push back to help out. Nice team play, clean stuff from Ecuador there. Really making sure that they close this out. They lose one player in the process, so clean is maybe an overstatement, but at least they stay in this, and they stay in this top 4 as well.
Massive stuff. Coming in as the defense. And the one team that has really just kept themselves out of any direct fights has been Brazil. Not letting anyone get too close. They know. I think they know about Navy Molina. You can tell these guys want to play it as safe as it gets. They really want to secure this round. That's all they need. They're just the first chicken dinner. They're not going for any overcommitments. They're not going for any kill points unnecessarily. That goes to show you that strategy might change in a best of 12, especially with 11 teams. Which in turn also means if you pick up a round, there's obviously less points for you to secure outside of it. That means that you will be further ahead than what you normally are if there's more players to be eliminated, obviously. And a round win normally always comes with at least some amount of frags. So winning rounds, getting the chicken dinner might be even more important in a lobby like this. And Brazil has now got 4 players right in front of them. I said this, they haven't been forced into any fights up until this point, but I think this might be it. I don't think they can coexist right here.
This is tough, but if you're looking at the map as well, so many players on this eastern side, right? Like you're saying, they might not be able to coexist depending on the shift, but we only have 13 players alive, and 8 of them are staring at each other just on this eastern side. If this fight doesn't go cleanly, if this fight gets messy, if this fight has a few trades in, we might just see Ecuador coming out of the compound winning it, or maybe even the Argentinian duo picking up some really good third parties. So this is a bit of a challenge for these teams to disengage. Aquiles is getting in the car, but Indigo Diego springs the trap, finds one, finds 2, hits the prone, and just like that, the team is dismantled. They have a good off angle on the side, but Bonilla is just getting the nades out, and even if that's a good nade, even if he finds one knock here, he's lost his whole team, and Brazil step up big. Yes, it's a bit messy, but I think this should easily be enough to get the reses here. Just get one player to the rocket, a few smokes out, and they're looking to win this game.
Yes, they are, but still, that was more messy than I expected it to be. And they've been very fortunate. The rest of the lobby has been fighting as well. No one was really able to party that afterwards. Especially since they only had 2 men inside the compound as well. More fights now running on through. Lorenzen takes one against Ecuador. That's important. And Argentina, that's the same on their edge, as they are fighting against the remaining players from Ecuador. Dallas down on the tree side. That's a nade from Navy. Pops perfectly, but pops just in front of the tree. Dallas somehow staying alive as he makes his way up towards the players. Has 12k in hand. It's been so strong in some of these qualifications, but not enough to really make a dent in that defense from Argentina. And that means they're going to stay alive, at least for a little bit longer. But Lil Boy's already there in the distance, trying to the party that west end side. Law with one, and I think Law with the second one as well. Oh my, wow. How fast was that? That went so incredibly fast. I don't even know who got the remaining frags there, but I think it was all Brazil picking themselves up a massive, massive chicken dinner with at least 15, 16 points.
That was crazy clean. That was crazy clean. We said this fight could maybe go messy, but it didn't at all. They were set up for it. They knew exactly what to do. Diego as well, right? Hits the prone just in time to make this really, really hard for the opposing team, and then they just clean it up. Even then, you see Argentina coming down from the hillside. They don't know it yet, but Little Boy has such a good off angle. They have no chance of making it down ever. If he stays alive there, 0 chance for Argentina to do anything in this game. So crazy stuff coming out of Brazil. I think a crazy salvage from the Argentinian duo as well. You have to give them credit for that.
Yeah.
But that looked very slow and methodical for Brazil, but it looked like clinical, super clean.
And let's be honest, I think it kind of was what we expected. We said that these favorites, they will be running away with it. And up until the very point they had to fight and they had to make a move before the circle actually moved, they didn't get into any unnecessary fights. And that just goes to show you, these guys really went for the chicken dinner. They could have gone more aggressively early. And it probably would have worked as well with the amount of individual skill they have. But they don't want to. They want to play this clean. They want to play disciplined, methodical. And if they continue like this, man, I think there's going to be way more chicken dinners to follow because, as we said as well, they were never in a position to get that party at any point. They could have, even if they would have taken fights, done so isolated all the way until the very end of the game. And that's where these guys, if you are experienced, if you are played in team, I think that's where you really shine. So Brazil, not unexpectedly taking that first game without losing a single player.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just a big problem for other teams in this lobby, right? Like, if they keep playing like this, because not only are they super strong, they're also just really hard to sort of find on the map. They weren't running out and taking fights. It wasn't easy to understand where Brazil was at any point. So you can just walk into them and suddenly you're just getting absolutely waltzed by an absolute death ball like we just saw, right? They had a 4-man right in front of them and they dismantled them in seconds, like 3 knocks in super quick succession. So gonna be a tricky thing for the rest of the lobby to handle. USA here, I love the play. I love the trigger discipline. I think they well executed that and got themselves 2 very, very neat kill points in a round that could have been a big 0.
Yeah, as you said, I think it also comes down to salvaging as much as you can, especially if you have so many big favorites in there that don't necessarily have as many problems in the other games as some of these other teams, especially if you do face them. I think some of these lesser experienced teams, to no benefit of the other contenders, will probably think twice about actually challenging them if they lose the first fight, right? Because the chances of them just wiping them clean, especially if they play it down from the beginning of it, are just so damn slow. And this, I really like what Brazil did here as well. They realized there's a team right on the other side, and if we fight this after the zone closes and we're forced to move, we're not only fighting against the blue zone and are potentially, you know, having to run into a third-party fight from distance as well. So they take initiative, they fight this before the zone moves, they fight this even though they're not necessarily forced into this, but because they want to regain control of the round. And look at this. Yes, it's been a bit messy. I think there were more knocks than there potentially needed to be, but they win it cleanly, and that's how you clean your edge and prepare yourself for the next fights. And I've always spoken about this. I'm so often talking about control, grabbing control of round. They really did with this fight.
Yeah, and there was one interesting thing in there as well, which I didn't think the reposition with the car was necessarily the problem for Colombia, but they were waiting for a second player to get into that car, but Brazil already knew. Okay, there's already a car driving around here. Like, maybe this is our time to get some shots off. They were already looking over the hill. They were already waiting for the opportunity. So if they maybe give them a little bit less time, if they maybe wait for the second player to be ready to start that vehicle, maybe there's a chance they actually make it out of there. But they probably would have still lost 1 or 2 players with how aggressive and how explosive Brazil handled that. So really, really well played by the South American squad there. SANHOK, not going to see a crazy amount of utility usage, and that is pretty much what we got here. 47 smokes and nades. Even though it feels like we caught most of them. We've seen a lot of util this game, but this is a SANHOK. It's not as strategical. It's a bit more of a brawl in some sense.
Yeah, I think a brawl in this one, especially with 11 teams, was kind of the perfect summary of it. Argentina actually with the most LMs, Mystic picking up 7. That's a surprise to me, but then again, Brazil has been rather quiet, and Argentina has made sure to hold that shack, that little 2-building shack or compound, if we might call it, on the northwestern side of things for almost the entirety of the game, and they kind of fought around that for so very long. And Mystic, we must at this point him out as one of the more important fraggers for Argentina. Has been able to really win all of these duels with his S12K and I think M4 in hand. Highest damage on him as well. 1.2k. This is going to give you confidence for the remaining games. If you start off with 7 frags in a qualifier like this for your country, representing your nation, you want to get right back into it.
Yeah, it's big. It's big for the mental, it's big for the scoreboard as well, but it's really big for the mindset on the team. Instead of actually going out early and having to sit around, do nothing for the rest of the game, they get to watch their teammates frag out, they get to cheer them on a little bit, and they end up with 15 points in the second place here. So yes, Brazil win the game. Hard to lose when you're playing that cleanly, but same amount of elims for Argentina, just 4 less placement points, and then Ecuador with a 3 elim third place as it slowly trickles on down the scoreboard. So a lot of the favorites we're seeing here, Argentina, Colombia, Brazil towards the top, and then maybe Chile, the one that we said might be up there, but keep in mind, this is one SANHOK, right? So don't put too much thoughts into it, but I was super impressed by how clean and methodical I was from Brazil.
But this is also a perfect representation of why we said that 11 teams are going to be different. These top performers are way more likely to run away with the teams that are consistent. Because look at the difference between middle of the scoreboard and the very top performers.
Yeah.
Usually you would have more teams in the middle grabbing at least some amount of points, but due to the fact that majority of the points are being traded in the very last phase, it kind of favors the team that is going to run away with it because there's less elims to gain and more placement points as a result, right? This proportion of placement points to elims is way higher than what it usually is. So grabbing placement points, making it far, winning rounds, especially winning rounds with a difference to 10-6, just mathematically speaking, is going to favor teams that will be picking up rounds more consistently. And that's also why maybe that is a reason why upset teams that will be able to maybe get away with some wins. Maybe Circle is going to play a factor in this as well. We'll have to wait and see. So far, it really didn't. But that some teams that are able to close out games more consistently than others will be at an advantage. And maybe that's going to favor underdogs to some degree. But this time, surely didn't. 9 frags in both teams. I'm very surprised to see Argentina have almost the same amount of points as Brazil. Just based off of the fighting that we've seen. But yeah, 9 eliminations on both teams. Brazil obviously playing a little bit slower there with around 500 damage less. Good performance from both of them. And I'm excited to see if Argentina can keep this up.
Yeah, I mean, polar opposites in gameplay, right? When we look at how they played this, Brazil chilling, holding really good center positions, moving out to the hill early, but even there, taking their time on the hill, not getting too aggressive. Argentina losing to players early and then just trying to claw back everything they could. 4 elims on Franzen and 7 on Mystic is a bit of a different picture, but it doesn't really matter in the end. When you close out that game, you win that game. The placement points are what matters, and the points that you get as a team are what matters. And yeah, we'll keep fanboying if they keep playing like this. It's that simple, right? There's no bias going on there. That was really good PUBG from Brazil.
This is interesting also because I just looked at the scoreboard and I kind of talked about this just there, but I didn't really realize that it was that big of a difference actually. If you think about it, how we said about strategic, right? About strategic plays. How big of a difference that actually is in an 11-team lobby with less kills being able to get secured and more placements being able to get secured. So that must change the strategy. And I think that's also why Brazil has played the way that we haven't really seen favorites usually playing this one. So they might be ahead of that curve. Either way, I think we're going to take a more closer look at that in game 2. But yeah, it's going to get, I think it's going to get us thinking.
We're going to have to wait and see what they do on the other maps. Maybe this was just a way to dodge the craziness of SANHOK, but we have 5 more maps for you tonight. So don't go anywhere. We'll head to a short break, and when we come back, we'll have Erangel for you. So stay tuned.